Welcome back, everyone, and welcome back to what is already our seventh session in a row. In this session, we're going to be talking about how do you use in-app ratings to uncover user needs and personalized experience, which personally I think is going to be a very, very interesting session. Just to cover the logistics once more, if you have any questions at any moment during the presentation, please use the question box that you see on the right-hand side, and we will moderate the questions towards the end of the session. You can also use the chat for any immediate assistance, but we will not be monitoring that throughout the sessions as well. Please know that the session is going to be recorded and that the recording will be shared with you afterwards. Since we have around 200 people in the session, please make sure that you will use the Q&A functionality and that you can upvote or downvote questions that you would like to see answered as well. It is my big pleasure to welcome today Harish, who is a principal engineer at Verizon. He has expertise in leveraging advanced analytics and machine learning to improve applications. He has led several cross-functional projects to draw insights on user behavior and develop new features with help of various analytical tools and models. Harish has prior experience in software programming and graduated from Kellogg School of Management with an MBA. Today, Harish is presenting from the US, in which the time zone is now in the morning again. So he's going to be our first US speaker of the day. A warm welcome to Harish. I really look forward to your presentation and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction and hey everyone. Again, I'm Harish and I'm currently based in New York City. So really excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity and hope this session is helpful. So so let me kick off by just talking about the topic itself, which is like in-app ratings to uncover user needs and personalized experience. So as part of my work at Verizon, I primarily focus on a product which is Verizon Cloud and support a few other products as well. And the idea is to really understand what the user needs are, how users perceive the product, and what are the pain points, and how do we ensure we provide value to these users. So throughout my work, I was able to try different analytical models or AI models, and so this is one area I feel which is very powerful, very impactful, but at the same time I think like underutilized or underrated. So that's why I wanted to present on this particular topic. So, first, what is in-app ratings? You might have seen if you go on Google Play Store or Apple App Store, whenever you want to download an application, you typically see the application along with like details of the application, some screenshots, and also very importantly, you see something called a rating as well, and you get to see reviews too. So these are all happening on the App Store. So typically, when a consumer wants to download this application, they look for something which has like great reviews, great rating, and gives them a sense of confidence that okay, this app is actually useful, and you get that validation from external other community out there. And so based on that, typically sometimes users download, unless someone is already very familiar with the application, they know for sure it's great. Ratings and reviews are very helpful to understand if they're making decisions about if they want to download or not. So you might have seen that, but something to keep in mind, or a question for all of you is, how many times have you actually gone and rated an application? How many times have you left a review on an application? So most likely not. There are few people here probably who would have been very unhappy with an application. They wanted to go out and went out and give a very bad review. But usually more often than not, like, people don't take the time to go to an app store rating and give a rating or a review, unless you're very happy customer or like very unhappy. More likely then not you're not going to leave a review or a rating. So that's on the App Store. Now, inside the application, so you might have seen either in like a B2B or a B2C product as well. Sometimes you get these notifications or in-app messages asking, how's your experience been so far? Can you give us a rating? So you typically can give like a 1 star or a 5 star or something in between. Sometimes it's a simple thumbs up and thumbs down as well. Do you like the application? Do you want to leave a review, etc.? And sometimes it's at the feature level as well, not at an application level. Let's say I've recently seen this. Once I completed a call on one of the video conferencing applications, it asked me like how was the quality of a call, for example. Or sometimes after using a certain feature, it you can see a pop-up message saying what do you think of this feature, if it's a new feature or a beta program, etc. So all of these ratings or reviews that the product managers or product teams for these applications are collecting, but not at a store level, but at inside the application, are referred to as something called in-app ratings. This is what like I call it. So let's use this terminology, but essentially think of it as something that happens inside the application where you're giving your feedback, and think of some of the examples that you might have encountered in the past. Now, why is this important? So let me first talk about what are the limitations of App Store ratings. Again, I'm not talking from a consumer point of view. I'm talking more from a business point of view. I'm talking more from a product or engineering or data point of view. So there are like several limitations of App Store ratings and reviews. So here are the top ones. The first most important thing is there's very limited context on the user. So let's say if someone gave a 1 star and left like a brief review, you don't have any information about the user. uh, you don't know really what plan type they are using, what maybe device that they are on, how long have they been using your product, are they a loyal customer or not. So all of that like very important like contextual information is like absolutely missing. Because of that, again, you can't do like really solid like analytics and really understand what the user pain points are, without this like meaningful context. I mean, you're still getting like some sentiment, I would say. If someone's giving a 1 star, you know that the person is unhappy. Based on the review, you can actually maybe, if usually they're not elaborating on the problem, but sometimes they do, so you can get like some information. But the overall context on like what is the type of user, what is the user segment that they would fall in, what geography, maybe what city, like none of that contextual information is like available. Now, the next limitation is adverse selection. So, as I already mentioned, users who are more often than not, like when unhappy, they tend to go on the App Store and want to rant or vent out and give a negative rating. So, or in certain cases, I've seen like very happy users also do that. So largely what is happening is this is not a very true representation of the sentiment among the user base. So either you see like very unhappy people or like happy people giving a rating, but what about the most folks who probably are just, more or less satisfied, but they're not like either extremes. So in that case also, you're not getting like really good information because of this adverse selection problem. Now, the third limitation is constantly changing app store ratings. So what happens is there are sometimes bots out there, there are sometimes spam, there's sometimes irrelevant rating or review on the app store. You might have seen this, and I have seen this sometimes where y- you know where someone is trying to talk about a certain application and give a negative rating, but instead for whatever reasons they go to some other application and then by mistake give a rating or a review there. So these are all like I would say like irrelevant and this like spam and bots. So ultimately what happens is like Google and Apple, they constantly try to recognize the irrelevant ones. You can, as a product team, flag those ratings and reviews, and then they'll try to investigate and take them down. So because of these, they're constantly changing reviews and ratings. So anytime, let's say we are in the month of May, I want to see what was the sentiment score in April on average. Now it will be different, and in the future, when Apple and Google, they remove some of these ratings, and in June, let's say you want to again see the ratings, average ratings in April, you might actually find a completely different score there. So it's not very consistent, it's constantly changing. Google and Apple might also want to change some algorithms. So all of this is not in your control, and hence I think it's not like a good benchmark to constantly have. Now, because of all these limitations, what I'm essentially advocating for is in-app ratings. So not at the store level, but inside the app. If you're a product manager, if you're a data team, collect these in-app ratings, which can be very powerful to understand user sentiment and uncover user needs. So let's go through some of those like important case studies. So the first one is like a very simple one, which is you can see how many people on an average, what was the average rating and how many people gave a rating. So you can do this trend analysis. You can see like, overall, are you going in the positive direction or not? And so you can do this very simple trend analysis of what are the users thinking about your application, what is the sentiment among the users. So now let's go to more advanced one, which is you can actually do very sophisticated triggers as well. So because this is inside the application, you have more control over when to ask a user for this in-app feedback. So you can trigger, as you see in the chart here, you have day 1, you can have it on day 7, you can make it manual, you can almost have it every day. Like, it's totally up to you to decide like when you want to trigger this. And this is very critical, because you have this control, you can do a lot more things. Let me talk about like few scenarios. The first scenario, let's say day 1, um, typically a user onboards, signs up on the application, and so you want to maybe measure the onboarding experience, like how comfortable and easy or seamless was the onboarding experience. So you can actually ask them for a feedback on either onboarding or just on day 1, what do you think of the application. Uh, so that's like very powerful information. You can understand how good the experience was and what are some of the ways you can improve it. Second, let's say day 7, a lot of times in certain applications, the churn is highest or deactivation is highest in the first few days or first few weeks or first few months, depending on the application, of course. So let's assume that, in a certain scenario, that a lot of people tend to churn on day 10 of joining. So I, as a user, if I join now, I am more likely to deactivate the application 10 days from now. So what you can do is, in that case, trigger in-app feedback on day 7. You can ask users, hey, what do you think of the application? You want to give a 1 star, 5 star, whatever it is, like, just ask them for that information. So even before they leave the platform, they tend to leave the platform on day 10, you can collect this valuable information. So these are some of the ways you can actually trigger it based on whatever you're trying to uncover. So that is like a very powerful opportunity to understand the user. Now let's look at some user segments as well that you can try to uh, uh, draw out in terms of like which user segments are happy, which user segments are not happy. So ultimately, the point of all of this exercise is to segment the users into happy bucket and unhappy bucket. Once you're able to do that, you can do a lot more interesting things to keep the happy users happy, maybe ask them to upgrade, maybe increase revenue per user through them. And unhappy users, you can actually try to retain them by offering discounts, and you can do a lot more things which we'll get to at a later point. But the idea is to segment the users to understand what is making them happy, what is making them unhappy. So for example, in this case, you see on the left hand side, these are like two plans in the application, and you can see the comparison of satisfaction score between the two plans. Apart from these plans, you can also do variety of like other filters, like you can base it on geography. Let's say you want to if there are users in two countries, let's say US and Canada, you can actually compare, are people in Canada more happy compared to US. So those kind of like interesting geography analysis, or age, or other demographics, so you can break down the ratings through these kind of like parameters. Next, you can also do like a plan type. You can see which month they are activating. So let's say people who are activating in the month of June versus May, people are happier in the month of June. People who activated in June are happier. So you can do that kind of like cohort analysis as well. Another important one is channel. Certain channels, people tend to come into the application and then leave right away. So you can really understand, are there any specific channels where through which if user is coming, they tend to be unhappy because maybe the expectations were not set right, maybe they were not properly informed about the value of the product for whatever reasons. You can actually see which channel people are unhappy. And lastly, what are the features that they are using? So let's say there are three features. Maybe you want to see people who are using feature 1 are more happy than compared to people who regularly use feature 2 and feature 3. So in that case, you understand that okay, maybe feature 1 is providing more value to the user. So you can build these kind of like hypothesis. Another example could be app version. So let's when you have like updates on the application, not everyone instantly updates to a new app version. So you can also compare like people in different versions of the application, who is more happy in these versions. And then lastly, engagement. You can also see people who are, let's say, highly engaged versus like moderately engaged versus not engaged at all. Which user segment is like happy? And sometimes I think we make this assumption that a highly engaged user is a happy user. I think a lot of times that might hold true, but that's a big assumption to make, and you can actually validate it. So bottom line is, these are some of the ways you can actually break down this in-app feedback into really understanding which users are happy, which users are not happy, and then further go to the next step, which is what is making them happy and what is making them unhappy. So once you have these kind of like basic analytics that one can perform and to really segment the user, one could also use machine learning AI models to automate some of this. So here is an example where one could use like k-means clustering, which is unsupervised learning. So you can actually look at all the different parameters that are maybe impactful and will influence the rating. It could be engagement, it could be month of activity, how much time they've spent on the application, it could be what plan type, etc. So it could be so many different factors. And then you can also do these clusters to understand like 1 star versus 5 star, which clusters are actually meaningful, which clusters are happy users, which clusters are unhappy users. So you can do these like simple machine learning algorithms to segment the users, I would say. And this is through a tool that I use, which is Nime. It's an open source tool, and you can't process a lot of data, like again, more than, let's say, a few million records. It'll be hard, I think. It might be tough for Nime to handle it, but like if your data set is not significantly high, you can actually do do this analysis through Nime and obtain these results. Now once you have these kind of like segments, let's assume that folks in green here are people who are, let's say, happy users. Then you can see what are the input parameters that actually you can distinguish compared to, let's say, these are unhappy users. You can actually distinguish between the parameters here versus here and try to really again further understand what is causing people to be happy or unhappy. So that's the point of this clustering. Again, I know this is unsupervised, so sometimes you might not fully really understand like how they were classified. But I think with like enough trial and error in terms of number of clusters and so on, you will be able to get some really good insights, and then you can further validate your hypothesis as well. This is another example. Again, this is a sample I took off from internet. I couldn't share for details from my product due to confidentiality. um, but apart from rating, you can also ask for feedback as well inside the application, not on the app store. Again, on the app store, reviews are available, but sometimes those reviews, as I said, are irrelevant or venting out or rant. But inside the application, you can really try to collect quality review, maybe incentivize the user, maybe ask them to offer them some coupon or discount or whatever it is. But you can ask them for like feedback, and you can do like a word cloud like this, or you can collect like reviews and go like categorize them into different categories and see what people are mostly talking about. So you can do a lot of like sophisticated analysis with the reviews. But the most important thing is the app store reviews might not be of good quality. So important to see what is the review like inside the application. You can try to improve the quality, and users might give like better reviews here compared to the app store. And once you have that, you can do a lot of like interesting analysis like a word cloud, or as I said, categorize them, understand what are the top concerns, and ask them for feedback. And sometimes you can even schedule an interview. Let's say someone really wrote like a lengthy review, and if you feel that review was useful, you can even reach out to them and ask them, hey, do you want to like get on a call with us and share your feedback? And I think sometimes this is like missing in the app store. Like you, because you don't have full information on the user, you might not be able to like reach out to them properly and schedule a call or ask them for more feedback. The next is churn versus rating. Again, very interesting analysis here, which is like the crux of like a lot of this in-app rating. So ultimately, you want to be able to build predictive models either through simple algorithms, simple analytics, or you can even use sophisticated machine learning or AI models. But if you see on the left side, these are the charts which talk about like who are the churners, and how what was the star rating that they gave inside the application. And this is another way to represent it, is like what is the churn rate among 1 star rating versus 5 star rating. So looking at this data, you can get like very interesting insights. One is 25 people, of all the people who churned, 25 of them were like 1 star rating. So basically 71% gave a 1 star rating, whereas 17% gave a 5 star rating. Now if you take a moment to understand what this means, essentially, let's say when before users deactivate the application, they are giving a 1 star rating. So they are literally telling you, or the product team or the data team, that they are unhappy with the application, and then they're going to leave the application in a few days, few weeks, wherever it is. So this can be a very powerful leading indicator. So you can actually build a good churn model. You can actually predict who are the users who are unhappy and likely to leave the platform. So now once you know this kind of information, that okay, a user is unhappy, they will leave the platform, or deactivate the application, you can do a lot more things to like keep them happy, retain them. So we'll get into that later. But the important thing is, using in-app rating, you can build a very good predictive churn model. You can assign a churn score. Let's say you can see engagement data, you can see rating data. Based on different other parameters, you can build a good churn score. What is the likelihood of a user with this kind of engagement, with this kind of activity, and with this kind of in-app rating, what is the likelihood that they will churn from the application? So this is again a leading indicator, so you can do a lot more powerful things. uh, the next one is, you can see here as a sample, 60% of the churners were using a certain version of the application. So what this means is, maybe something is wrong with this version. maybe for example there are more bugs and defects in this version, so you can try to like deep dive and diagnose what are the problems with this particular version. So this is how you could potentially either uncover user needs, or you can also build a sophisticated churn model as well. uh, Apart from the churn model, I think churn predictive model, one of the other things that you can do with in-app ratings is um, you can detect anomalies and try to diagnose what's the issue. So let's say on this chart here, this is again a deactivation on the churn chart on a daily basis. So I can see a big spike here, or two three big spikes here, and otherwise churn is pretty flat and stable, or more or less not deviating from the standard. So whenever these anomalies occur, we are always sometimes confused about like why did people leave the application on this particular day, and why was there a spike, and sometimes diagnosing can be hard. So I think you can again count on in-app ratings, let's say before this particular day or before this particular event. You can try to see like, were people unhappy about something, where were people giving low rating, and then maybe through reviews you can understand why people are like unhappy. So you can actually tie this spike or anomaly in churn, and then try to diagnose like what is the root cause of this kind of spike. For example, it could be some error, it could be some bugs and some defect in the application, it could be external factors as well, macroeconomic or competitors and so on. But the important thing is, by combining the anomaly detection and also in-app rating, you can really understand why this anomaly occurred. Otherwise, if an in-app rating is not available, you're left scrambling trying to understand like why people left, and without any real tangible insights. So this is like very powerful. The next one, once you do a churn analysis, let's say you identify day 7 as when people leave the most. So earlier example which I quoted, maybe on day 5 and day 6, you can try to understand why people are leaving on day 7 specifically. Maybe you can try to retain them, maybe you can try to see variations. Let's say most of the month you see day 7 as like a high churn date, maybe in the next month it could be day 14 for example. So if you see any change in patterns like this, again you can take in-app ratings to try to understand like why this change in behavior. So these kind of like again diagnosis one could perform by combining different kinds of like churn, different kinds of anomalies, and then tie it back to in-app ratings. These are like more sophisticated ways one could try to uncover. So one of the things that I was able to do is, by looking at happy users or unhappy users, you can actually chart out the navigation path inside the application. So each node here represents a feature or an event inside the application, and these lines represent the path taken from one event to the other. So for an application which has a lot of events and a lot of features, so each click of a button can be captured here, and each feature also can be, or a screen can be captured here. So essentially you can see people are coming inside the application, going around the application, and the thickness represents which path is most taken, or which features or events are most clicked upon. So what you can do with this kind of analysis is very interesting. One, you can see for happy users and unhappy users, is there a change in path? Are they actually using certain paths or events, performing certain events more than the other? So based on that you can uncover maybe certain things about the application. Maybe you can see, is there any gap in the navigation itself for happy versus unhappy users? Maybe there are more dead ends here, or you can try to make features that are more used by happy users more prominent on the home screen, or make it easy for the users to go to those. So those kind of like interesting navigation that analysis that one could perform. So all of this is captured on like network. These are referred to as network, and you can do network analysis. And here I used a tool called Gephi, again open source. So you can transform your data from events, get client side metrics or client side activity, and then use something like a Gephi to really visualize this and understand how users are traversing inside the application, and then see the path difference between like happy users and unhappy users. The other interesting analysis on the right side, if you see, uh, again going back to the earlier point, is actually a highly engaged user a happy user? A lot of times in the application, when we're maintaining applications, when we are trying to drive traffic, a lot of times we believe, especially in a subscription model, right, we believe that if we engage the user, they will retain with us longer, they will use the application for a longer period of time. But sometimes that might not be true. Someone who is not very engaged might still continue to pay, might still be happy with the application. So it's a false notion sometimes that highly engaged user is a happy user. So you can try to differentiate between those two aspects by again using in-app ratings. So you can, for example, see, I try to see average engagement, which is how many sessions did they have in a particular month, let's say. And then people who had like 41 sessions versus 26 sessions, are people who had more sessions more happy? In this case it looks like it, because people who had more sessions on average gave a 5-star rating versus unhappy. So again, these are correlations, this is not causality, but you can maybe try to really uncover what is the difference between engaged user versus happy user in your application by again going through this kind of like analysis. And again, this will be helpful, because if your user is happy without much engagement, don't have to force them to be engaged, don't have to spam them with like zillion emails or push notifications and try to get them to engage. So it's really important to like validate this hypothesis that happy engaged users lead to happy users, and then take steps accordingly. You can change marketing strategy, you can change engagement strategy, push notification strategy, based on this kind of analysis. And so another way I would say to really personalize the experience is like, let's take a home screen example, where let's say in this particular application, or a lot of times users tend to come to the home screen and spend most time there trying to understand what's going on. So on the home screen you can use in-app rating to really personalize the experience. And again, you need to have like supporting infrastructure, you need to have design components that can be flexible. So you need to have that front end which is a little more flexible to be able to do this. But assuming that you have that, first thing is, you can, let's say, if you know who are the happy users, you can actually on the home screen promote more upgrade opportunities, more opportunities to cross sell other products, because you know that these are happy users, they want more probably, and they're willing to pay more. So you can personalize the home screen through these kind of like marketing techniques. The next one is for features. Let's say not only at an app level, at a feature level you get ratings, right? Like let's say feature 1 2 3, feature 2 is highly rated by users. So what you can do is take feature 2 and put it on the top. You can put arrange your home screen or navigation so that features which are highly rated and people are happy about, put them on the top. So you can do that kind of like feature rating as well. And you can do simple rule based options approach here, where you can say feature 2 should be higher if it has a higher rating. But you can also use AI models and machine learning models to also use a combination of, let's say, feature rating, engagement, time durations on the apps, or what kind of a plan type. So you can add many parameters and try to use like machine learning or AI models to really rank your features. But a simple thing can be just high rating feature, you just put it on the top, or make it easy for users to discover it in the application. So those are some of the things that you can do. And lastly, for unhappy users, let's say you want to retain them, so maybe try to drive engagement with specific features that they care about. You can try to maybe offer them discounts, maybe extend the trial period so that they stick with you longer, so that they understand the value of your product, and then based on that they can take a call. So you can really personalize the experience on the home screen or any other page or navigation based on in-app rating or feature rating as well. And when you're deploying some machine learning models, I think really important to keep in mind like what are the input parameters that you're giving, so that you really understand like are these parameters really valuable and helpful, and do they influence the rating or engagement. Identify any kind of like bias in the AI models. Let's say there are two features that go hand in hand and users tend to use them together, maybe that might actually add to the bias. So you have to remove some of that. And then anything you do with in-app ratings or analytics and marketing, etc., I think very important to have thorough user testing to understand how the user experience is. Validate some of your hypothesis by talking to users, doing qualitative studies. So there's no substitute for that. Any quantitative studies you do, I think I always feel you should sort of augment that with or complement that with qualitative studies as well, to really understand what you're assuming is actually true or not from certain users. So with this I'll conclude the presentation by saying that think about what other ways you can gather user feedback within your application. It could be rating, it could be reviews, and how do you one use that to analyze why a user is unhappy or happy. Second, try to keep them happy or retain them if it's an unhappy user. And lastly, how do you personalize your entire application based on different user segments. So hopefully this was helpful, and please reach out if you have any further questions and if you want to learn more. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thanks, Harish. This was a really, really insightful presentation. I actually learned quite a lot myself. Very good models, and also a topic that I didn't know a lot about. So I think this was very excellent. You might have already seen it coming in while you were presenting, but there's a lot of questions that came in. Luckily, we still have some time, so I'm going to try to moderate as many as possible. But you obviously hit a topic that is of a lot of interest to a lot of people. So let me start with Jean, who has quite a number of questions. I'm going to start with the first four to show you. So let me just discuss them one by one, and maybe then we can dive into them a little bit more in detail. First question is, how do you see apps development market as compared to website development? Is that becoming more uniform, or do you kind of see that as separate topics?
I think very two different categories altogether, and so a lot of times, now websites are becoming more focused around like talking about their product or talking about the offering. But I think application is where you can really engage them. I think no longer, in few exceptional cases, but no longer websites are seen as the place to really engage the users. Application you can do a lot more. So I think that's where engagement really happens for a longer period of time. So I think that's like the primary difference, I would say.
Good. Thank you so much. I think it's very much in line with the difference between branding versus more around functionality.
Right.
Good. Second question here is, as the service provider market is getting more competitive, will app development costs slowly decrease as what has happened to website development as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's already happening, and there are like several no-code applications or options available. You also see people outsourcing it to certain countries, so that also reduces costs. You also see inbuilt libraries or SDKs and so many other tools available, which is again lowering the cost. And lastly, I think with progressive web applications, where you can use like one application using web technology and almost functions like a native application, and you can use that cross platform, right? Like now currently you don't have to maintain then an iOS code, an Android code, a web portal or desktop application. You can all combine this into like a progressive web application. So I think that is also like potentially going to reduce cost significantly. So these are some of the trends I see are actually leading to a lower cost.
Very good. Yeah, that's a very good observation, I think, and especially those cross-native applications, I think, are really going to shake up a lot of the traditional web development world. Good. I'm going to combine, for the sake of time, questions 3 and 4 together. Are AI technologies cost and website maintenance lower or higher compared to app maintenance? And more generally speaking, can AI technology fully automate customer service app for app maintenance? What's your view on that?
So I think the question in terms of AI, I feel like AI is like independent of, is if it's website versus application. I mean, it's just a platform for you to like really crunch the data, process the data, and get insights. Maybe you could argue inside the application, because users are spending more time, you are collecting more data about the user, so that's why maybe your costs will go higher. But otherwise, like, it can be pretty independent, I would say. And in terms of like AI technology fully automating customer services for app maintenance, um, so I fully didn't understand the question, but like let me try to answer whatever I could. Uh, I think a lot of times like customers have complaints, a lot of times customer have issues with the application. So in those cases, one, you want to first understand what the user complaint is. You want to ensure that the user is happy by maybe giving some offers. You want to also fix the problem. So I think in all of these parameters you can definitely deploy AI, and these are three different, almost different use cases. But I think maybe for understanding the customer complaint, interacting maybe with trying to offer them value to keep them in the application, I think it's more easy to automate using AI. But fixing a problem using debugging, etc., I think it still requires like engineering talent to get involved. It's not like AI can come and like suddenly fix your application. So yeah, that's how I would break it down.
So a basic of AI with still powered by humans.
Right. Yep.
Good. Then let me switch to another question that came in from a different participant. And I think this is a good question. I actually don't know the answer to this question. Are in-app ratings standardized in app stores? Because I
No.
see
So these are
that
all. Hmm.
I see always it's like 5 stars. It's kind of the industry standard. Or do individual applications decide how they collect feedback?
Yeah, so individual applications decide. You can, as I said earlier, you can either collect a simple thumbs down, thumbs up.
Okay.
You can just ask them happy smiley, unhappy smiley, or you can give them a star rating as well. So it's totally in your control as well. So nothing to do with App Store. They are not like standardizing it in any way. You have full control. That's why it's more powerful. But one of the things that I've seen, companies do is, let's say a user gives a 5-star rating, you can nudge them to say that, hey, it seems like you're happy, would you be okay leaving a similar rating on a app store, and then give them a link to the app store. So that's something people do. But to just simply answer your question, it's not standardized. It varies from application to application. It's totally up to you.
Good. I think that was a very good question. I even didn't know the answer to that. And then one more question from Jean. I think is also a good kind of closing question. There's a lot of the do-it-yourself tools for website development. Are there any good do-it-yourself tools for app development you can recommend? I think I already know what you're going to say.
I mean, I don't have any specific names, but maybe one thing that I recently came across was like Plotly. It's called. It's an open. It's a no code platform. If you just have like Python framework and libraries, you can actually, the front end can take care of itself through like design components. But again, that is something I recently came across, so it's been on my mind. But there are a lot of like no code solutions available that you can research and try it out. I have also heard like Amazon Firebase is like gaining popularity. So I don't know much about that, but I've heard it quite a few times. But yeah, I would say I'm not the best person to answer which one's a better tool. But I would say use like no code applications or tools if possible, if you're not a programmer and if you want to go via that route.
Have you heard of development platforms like Flutter, and what's your opinion around that?
I have heard of it. Again, I haven't used personally like no code or these platforms, so I wouldn't want to comment. Yeah,
Okay,
but yeah, I think that's gaining popularity because more and more people who are more business oriented, people who are not programmers, also want to create applications. So that's why they're choosing the no code solutions.
good. Thank you so much. With that, we're getting unfortunately towards the end of our time. Before I close the session and thank Harish, let me just very briefly share what is going to be our closing keynote that is coming up in 15 minutes. And we're going to be looking in the closing keynote. We're going to be listening to Jordan Mora, who's the Vice President and Head of Data and Analytics at Brainstorm, a celebrated author and one of the, I would say, leading voices when it comes towards data literacy. So make sure that you're joining for that session. That this is definitely a speaker also you don't want to miss during today's presentations. With that, I would like to very sincerely thank you, Harish. I always like presentations that go a lot in depth and that discuss content quite well. And I think you excelled in that today. This was a very insightful and very useful presentation that really covered, I would say, beyond basics. So I'm very happy that you decided to join as a speaker. This was an excellent session. That's also what you saw coming back in all the questions. So I truly want to thank you for participating in Big Data Days this year. And I hope I can call on you again in the future to contribute more to these kinds of events.
Yeah, again, thank you for the opportunity, and I also enjoyed the session and the questions as well. So looking forward to engage with other events and reach out to me for getting more clarity or more information about the topic that I presented. Thank you again. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Harish. I'm going to close the session right now. And thanks, everyone. And you can now start joining the last keynote presentation.